Ellie, there are some organizations that see advocacy for the poor as particularly important. They think that it's not just a matter of providing them with bed nets or deworming the kids, but that they are, in some ways, need to be empowered, and that the global economic order is not level for them, that they come up against big mining companies or something of that sort. They come up against government policies. And it's really important to be an advocate for the poor, either at the level of the US government or internationally. And they suggest that if you donate to them, then there could be a very large payoff in terms of changes in policy that could help millions of people. Do you have a view about that? Do you have a view about supporting organizations that are engaged in advocacy for the global poor?
I think advocacy for the global poor could be one of the best ways to give money. GiveWell has not looked at advocacy organizations because we have tried to focus on the types of programs that have a demonstrable evidence-based track record, which is not something that exists for advocacy organizations, at least evidence of the type we'd be looking for. A few years ago, we started a project called the Open Philanthropy Project, which is very similar to GiveWell in its mission to find the best giving opportunities we can, but it's different in that it doesn't hold as tight to the criterion of track record and evidence base. And so as part of this Open Philanthropy Project, we have looked at advocacy for the global poor specifically, and are open to looking at advocacy organizations more broadly and other types of giving opportunities that are higher risk and potentially higher reward.
In the Open Philanthropy Project, do you think that there's a methodology for comparing very different sorts of causes? So not just things that are focused on global poverty, but things that are focused, for example, on perhaps the environmental aspects. Obviously, climate change is one environmental concern that will also greatly affect the global poor, but will have other ramifications. And then there may be other causes that very long-term. Educating people is clearly, we regard as a good thing, both in terms of educating the poor and educating people in affluent countries. Are you looking for some ways of trying to get a handle on how you could decide between different causes?
Well, we expect the comparisons in the Open Philanthropy Project to be significantly more qualitative than the comparisons that we made for GiveWell. Even in GiveWell, there are still some significant qualitative judgments we have to make. But as we move beyond the bounds of the cause of global poverty, these comparisons are even more challenging. And so instead, we think we have some questions that we ask for every cause we look at as part of the Open Philanthropy Project, and try to compare the causes based on their answers to these questions. And so those questions are, first, how impactful could a major change in this area be? So how big a deal would it be if we were to resolve the problems of climate change or significantly increase or improve aid to the global poor? That's one question we ask. Another one is, how tractable is this area? Meaning, how likely is it that we could get involved or donors could get involved and make a difference? And then finally, how crowded is the area? How many other donors are already there? And does it seem like additional donors and additional funds could make a difference? And while we can't create an objective scoring system that lets us rate every cause in the world on their answers to those three questions, what we're trying to do conceptually is be open to any area and use the answers to those questions as a guide about which ones to prioritize.
Okay, thank you. So we don't have very much time left, but let me come back to GiveWell itself as an organization. Obviously, you've grown significantly from the time when it was just you and Holden. How many people are you employing now?
We are 18 people today, but are planning to keep growing, and we're hoping to be roughly 30 by the end of the year.
Okay, so it's getting to be a reasonable size organization, and obviously you must have a budget for that. So let me ask the kind of GiveWell question about GiveWell. If I were thinking about donating to GiveWell in order to support your work, what evidence could you provide to me about whether this donation would be a highly effective thing to do with my money?
It's a good question, and certainly one we ask of ourselves. The two main measures of our impact are the donations that we direct to our recommendations, and then the quality of those recommendations. So the donations that we recommend, the money that we direct, we track very carefully. And in 2014, we tracked roughly $28 million to the charities that we recommended as a result of our research. The quality of our research and recommendations is not something that we can track objectively, but we make all of our research public and transparent, so anyone can look at it and raise problems, ask us questions, and we believe that gives a indication of the quality of the research that we do. We also follow up with every single charity that we recommend to evaluate its progress over time, publishing updates about what they did, both what went well and what went poorly when things don't go as well as we hoped, and share that all on our website. And so I giving the audience who follows us an update on the effect of the money that they gave and the quality of the recommendations that we made.
Okay, so let's say, so you track $28 million to the charities that you most highly recommend, and let's assume that that money wouldn't have reached them. So that's assuming that these are good recommendations, as you say, and that's up for people to judge on looking at the nature of your research. So how much is it costing you? Can you say to send that $28 million to these highly effective organizations?
Yeah, so I might get the numbers slightly wrong, but it cost us roughly $2 million in 2014 to run GiveWell's operations, about half of which was for GiveWell and half of which was for the Open Philanthropy Project.
Right.
So it's about $1 million for GiveWell to direct the $28 million
okay.
to the recommendations.
That does sound like an outstanding return. And the $1 million that goes to Open Philanthropy, you're regarding that as not yet showing results, but you hope it will show results at some future time. Is that correct?
Well, last year, the Open Philanthropy Project made grants of a little bit over $8 million. That is still, it's a relatively new project, and we expect that number to grow significantly in the future. So it's already having some direct impact on funding, but I would expect that impact will continue to grow significantly.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it at there. But thank you very much, Ellie, for talking to us about GiveWell. And let me just say in closing that personally, I've found it vastly easier to recommend to people that they should donate to charities and to effective charities since GiveWell came into existence. Because before there was GiveWell, as you indicated, that you yourself found out, really you could only see how much of a charity's money went to administrative costs and how much went to programs, and that didn't tell you anything about the effectiveness of the programs. So when people said, how do I know that this is really a good charity? There really was no really solid answer I could give them. I could tell them about my personal impressions, but obviously you've really changed the nature of the ball game in that area, and I congratulate you on making it much easier for people to really be altruists and feel good about what they're doing with their money.
Well, thank you. We really appreciate that.
Thanks. Thanks a lot, Eddie. Bye.